Hi, if you are watching me and you don't know who I am, I want to introduce myself. My name is Cadrick Jones. And that's not all I want to tell you about myself because I was going through some old content just a couple of days ago and I ran across some notes that I wrote from when I was in a session with Dr. Darius Daniels. And it chin checked me just like it did back then. Dr. Daniels made the statement, he said that it is egregious. He probably didn't use those words, but he said it's egregious and nearly a sin to not market yourself. Now, that shook me to the core and it changed the whole way I viewed how I presented myself. It didn't change the way I presented myself, but it changed the way I viewed how I presented myself because sometimes I felt that I should kind of dumb down or be a little softer in my approach in presenting who I am and what I do. But over time, I've understood exactly what Dr. Daniels was saying, that if we fail to share with people what we do and market ourselves appropriately, then we're actually sinning. Because Jesus made the statement that we should let our light shine before all men so that others will see our good works and glorify the Father who is in heaven. And the reason not sharing what we do and not marketing ourselves could be seen as sin is because it limits the praise that goes to God. We prohibit people from celebrating the grace of God on our lives and celebrating the God who gave us the grace when we refuse to adequately market ourselves. So, with that in mind, I just thought I'd like to share a little bit about who I am. Not a little bit. I would like to share who I am, what I do, what I've done, and what my background is. So, I came from a place called Eudora, Arkansas. It's in the Delta region of the US. And I grew up in the poorest area or poorest region in the US still to this day. But the one thing that I had while I was growing up is I had a good community. That community that I received helped me to really become who I am, helped me to be able to navigate through all of the experiences that I've received and that I've gone through over the years. And it helped me to get opportunities that I would not have received had I not learned what I learned from the community that I grew up in and the community that was surrounding me. So let's talk about some of those things that I was afforded, even coming out of poverty. I started working at the age of 7 years old. And before you begin to scream child labor abuse, my first job was given to me by a lady by the name of Mary Simpson. Mary Simpson worked at a convenience store and gas station right up the alley from my house. I would go in there, and many times I would just go over to hang out with some of my friends whose parents were washing their car at the car wash just adjacent to the gas station. And as I would go over there, sometimes I would go into the store. Sometimes it'd be hot outside. I go into the store and I look around. I knew I didn't have any money. And Mary, she looked at me and she understood what my desire was. My desire was to be able to go in there and purchase things, not to steal, but to purchase things. But she knew what other people would think of my perusing around the store. So Miss Mary Simpson, she ended up giving me a job bagging ice. She told me to go wash my hands. She says, and I'm going to give you a job. She says, for every bag of ice that you bag, I'll give you 10 cents. And so I would go over there and I would work hard. I would bag ice. And I think I ended up getting up to almost $20 bagging ice. So that's where I learned my work ethic. I learned that anything that is worth having is worth working for. So I worked for Miss Mary, and I will always credit her as giving me my first job. I talk to her, one of her sons, and I tell him all the time, "Your mama gave me my first job." Growing up in a rural area, my grandmother was a farmer, but she didn't have all the resources that the other farmers around her had because she was a black female farming in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. And if you know anything about the Pickford case against the USDA, then you understand that was a hard thing to endure for a black woman. She had 40 acres and she had to rely on the labor of her children and grandchildren and people like me, her great grandchildren, to make sure that the land was taken care of and that we were able to harvest and be able to produce our own food because there was very little that she could sell because she just was working to feed her family. So she couldn't make the money that all of the neighbors around her made, who were white and who were males. And so I understood that you have to learn how to make decisions and make choices to keep pushing even when life is unfair. I moved to Little Rock, Arkansas at the age of 14. At the age of 14, 15, and 16, I served in leadership within church ministry. I was, by no choice or desire of my own, voted as president of the youth department at the church that I grew up in. I served there and I served faithfully, and I was invited to participate in so many things simply because of that particular role that I carried. And I did not understand at that time that I was being groomed and prepared for something that I was not aware of and probably did not even want to be a part of. And so I had several mentors. These mentors helped to shape me into who I am today. Mentors by the name of Prentice Dupins, of Ken Martin, of Donna Grady Creer, Laura Martin, Johnny Smith, who was also a neighbor, Freddie Fields, Carol Hampton, Tavi Hampton, Linda Sue Wallace, her sister, Glenda Woods, Deborah and Tim Woods. They impacted my life just by standing back and watching them from a distance. My dad understood the assignment of making sure that I wasn't just being influenced by him because he had limited time, because he was in the military, full-time National Guard. But he put people around me who influenced me and impacted my life. Those individuals, just watching them, because many of them were young adults at the time, but watching them really impacted my life and impacted how I carried myself, impacted how I interacted with people because I was very shy. And after graduating high school, I did not really have a desire to go to college, mostly because I didn't know if my father could afford to send me to college. So what I chose was something that I was going to do to be able to make money because I always understood that if man doesn't work, he doesn't eat. And so when I graduated high school, I decided to go into the Navy. My dad was concerned about that because we were just on the threshold of Desert Storm and Desert Shield. And my dad being a full-time National Guard and being a War College graduate, he understood what was at stake. And so he wanted different for me, but I also told him I didn't want him to try to pay for my college education. I would rather go and work and go to the military, and then it would help me pay for college. So I was in the military for 4 years. I had the specialty of what's called a dispersing clerk, which was a payroll clerk. Did not get a chance to work in my field for the extended period of time because I ended up getting sick, was one reason. And the other was I had to deal with a racist supervisor who was leading my particular division. I reached out to division officers and my chain of command in an attempt to get things to change. But because things never changed, he became abusive, physically, verbally, emotionally. And so I had to endure the abuse that I received and also the unfair and unjust nature But as God would have it, I ended up being able to still serve, even though I had to stand up for myself. And standing up for myself could have gotten me kicked out of the military, but I thank God for a man by the name of Anthony Campbell, who heard when I defended myself. And even though it put him at risk of losing rank and not being able to promote, he took up for me, he stood up for me, and I'll be forever grateful for that. And so, Tony, if you're watching, or Tony Jr., if you're watching, I'm forever grateful for that. His son and I ended up meeting once before. And so this put me in a place to where I did not gain all the skills that I wish that I could have received. But at the same time, I was able to receive a humanitarian medal from, at the time, President Bill Clinton, because I learned how to serve people who didn't look like me, didn't have the same culture as me, didn't have the same background as me, even though some things I could relate to. And even in those situations, I saw injustices that were being done because we were responsible for picking up Cubans who were trying to escape their native land because of the lack of opportunity that were there. And those individuals were taken and they were dropped off in Florida. But then you had some of their neighbors, the Haitian people who were doing the same thing as the Cubans, who were taking boards and small boats and getting whatever they could to try to float their way across the Caribbean Ocean to the Atlantic in order to get to the United States to find a better life. And when we picked up those Haitians, they were not treated as fairly and as equally as their Latino neighbors who were a little lighter than them. Those individuals were instead taken to Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, where there was a U.S. installation that was there, and they put them in tents and behind barbed wire as though they were criminals. And so I understood anti-blackness even as a young adult in dealing with international affairs in the military. Again, I was taught at an early age how to continue to push and pursue in life, even when things seemed unfair. And as you've heard, I dealt with a lot of unfair situations while I was in the military, and I also experienced and saw a lot of unfair situations when I was in the military. When I was able to receive my honorable discharge 4 years after enlisting into the Navy, I ended up getting out. When I got out, even though I had dispersing clerk, payroll clerk on my resume, I did not have the experience on my resume to show that I really understood what I was employed to do in the military. But what I was able to receive while I was in there, I was able to receive order and structure and discipline. So I was able to apply the things that I learned from my childhood and combine them with the things that I learned as a young adolescent serving in leadership capacities in a city that I've never been in before, among a people but that I've never been around before. And I learned to couple those two things with the experience that I received in the military. And I made those things work for me. Those things were able to allow me to be in positions to where I served in ministry and in leadership and in high levels of leadership as a very young adult. I was the first young adult leader at St. Mark Baptist Church. This is the same church that I grew up in, being a leader. I served as a young adult leader. I also served as the executive administrator of a nonprofit Fellowship of Christian Churches that was being sponsored and funded by another group within the city that was backed by Southern Baptist interest. So if you don't know the difference between Southern Baptist and National Baptist, Southern Baptist is white, National Baptist is black predominantly. Because it was backed by Southern Baptist interest, the things that were brought to the table by darker skinned counterparts were not readily adhered to, but they wanted the presence of darker skinned individuals to be able to make themselves seem safe. I'm telling you what my experience was, not what I heard, right? I was an executive of a nonprofit at the time. And so I have nonprofit leadership. And after that, I went on to work for General Motors in collections and also in customer service. After leaving there, I went to work for the city of Little Rock. I worked in the treasury management department, getting people approved for business licenses and also making sure that those business licenses were paid in full. I had to go through the courts in order to get certain certifications. I had to spend a certain number of hours in court. And so I learned a lot about the criminal justice system. I learned about recidivism. I learned about unfair treatment. I saw with my own eyes a white judge who would be very lenient upon someone and would literally feed them the excuse that they needed to get out of the ticket that they received. While there's a young black male who the only thing he's trying to do was get back and forth to work. And because he was told that he had an illegal lane change, now he's in the system and he's circulating throughout the system and he's working. And because he's working, when the letter is sent to his home, he did not get the warrant that said that he needed to show up for court. And because of that, now a bench warrant is issued on him. And so he has a ticket, he has a bench warrant. And because he now has a bench warrant, his license is suspended. But he still has to get back and forth to work and nobody's able to take him. And so he has to drive himself. And even though he has requested through his probation officer the permission to be able to still drive back and forth to work, he gets it, but yet he gets stopped on his way home simply because he stopped to get gas or stopped by the grocery store on the way home to feed his family. So now he's in this revolving door. And so I understood the courts. I understood how they're working. I even carried a badge when I would go to businesses and I had to go face to face to small business owners who were doing their best, who did not know that they even needed a business license. They were just trying to find a way to make ends meet, but they were not given access to understand all the things that were necessary for them to do business effectively. And there were some that were doing business effectively, but were snitched on by individuals who perceived that they were not doing things the right way. And those individuals, I would go in and I would tell, I understand what's going on. And I'm sorry that you experienced this. And I began to make really good friends, lifelong friends, just because I was able to advocate for them. And I was able to stand before the judge because I was able to understand all of the regulations surrounding their businesses and how they were supposed to operate. And I was able to help the judge understand that these people were not doing things the wrong way. They were trying to do things the right way. But now you have them up in front of the court trying to defend themselves and they're losing time and money. And so I understood, not only did I understand the court systems, I understood small business. I understood local government. And then after that, I ended up working for a church as a full-time pastor. I started pastoring. So I've been pastoring for 22 years now in pastoral ministry in one regard or the next. I started pastoring at the age of 28 and leading people. So I understood not just nonprofit organizations, I understood how the business side of ministry worked. I understood bringing in income. I understood capital campaigning. I understood all of those things. I understood the legalities that were necessary for a organization, whether it be nonprofit or corporate, to function at its highest level. And then after that, I ended up working in corporate America. I worked for Blue Cross and Blue Shield. I worked there for 8 years. And the thing about working for Blue Cross and Blue Shield, unlike many of the other jobs that I worked between the nonprofit executive job and Blue Cross and Blue Shield, I went in as a manager, working under the leadership of a vice president. I was able to be mentored by one of the greatest leaders that I've ever known by the name of Ms. Tony Stark. Not Tony Stark on the Avengers, but Tony Starks. And working under Tony, I learned how to navigate the boardroom. I learned how executives think. I learned the things that needed to take place in order for a team to be built effectively. I understood that. I grew in that. I learned that. And understanding that I was able to sit on boards and establish board governance and become board chairmen. I was a board member of the Arkansas Disability Rights Association, and I was the board governance chair for the Disability Rights Association. And then not only that, I went back to school, but I remember specifically God giving me a dream because I was working full time. By this time, I was no longer working for Blue Cross and Blue Shield. I was working for another insurance company. It was actually a Fortune 350 company at the time. And I was working in a capacity to where I was helping to implement things that I learned at Blue Cross because I understood the Affordable Care Act. I understood health insurance. I understood Medicare and Medicaid. I understood all of those things, and I was able to apply those things in the job, and it was able to put me in a very influential position to where I was able to help build and move that Fortune 350 company to a Fortune 46 company. It wasn't by the work that I did alone, but I was an integral part of building the organization to the point where it was I just happened to be in the right place at the right time to have the right skills and the right skill sets to be able to help the organization grow. And so working in that role, I did implementation management. I did training and development management and implementation. I did course development. I was a representative for my organization with contractors, and so I was a customer relations manager and a contract manager, and I did all of those without having the title. And so I served in those roles. I helped to build compliance programs to help an organization switch from government-sponsored healthcare products to a product to where the person is paying for it to a commercial product. And so I was able to help build compliance infrastructure for those or for that particular organization. I was able to work for another organization who was a third-party administrator. I was able to help them to build their claims and also build out their structure for developing their onboarding, their training, and also the compliance management piece of it. And so those are things that I did in the corporate world. I've also worked in healthcare IT. I worked for Oracle as a training consultant to where I would go to VA locations because we had a contract with the VA. I would go to those locations and I would help to establish the training for new systems that were being implemented. And I was able to serve as a change agent as well as adoption management consultant. Not only have I worked in healthcare from the health insurance perspective, not only was I able to work in healthcare from the healthcare IT perspective, not only was I able to work in healthcare from a Medicaid, Medicare understanding, not only was I able to work in healthcare from a compliance standpoint, but I helped to develop leadership frameworks for while I was in corporate America. And I built leadership frameworks, and I served in management roles, roles that I was not too keen upon serving in, but because of the work that I did in so many other areas, I was recruited to work in those areas. I was able to build teams that were successful and growing and thriving and successful and meeting metrics and exceeding metrics. I was able to build successful teams. And then after moving from corporate America and then moving out of health insurance and compliance and claims management and provider services and member services, I was able to land a job still working in healthcare for a government agency. And I was able to help that agency not only improve healthcare for its state citizens, but I was able to develop and be a strong fixture in the strategic development area, where not only did we do strategic planning, we also did succession planning, because we had a situation to where we would lose 15% of our workforce, or 15% of the workforce will be eligible for retirement in 5 to 7 years. In 5 to 7 years. But in addition to that, because of my experience, because of my lived experience, because of my background, because of everything that I had seen and done, I was able to incorporate all of that into helping this particular agency build an infrastructure of equity. In other words, I was responsible for building programs and initiatives to make sure that people had equitable opportunities to get development, and also to get funding for their personal development, and also to get opportunities to serve in other areas where they can get the experience that they need. And so, because I've done that, I understood and understand what it means to walk through change management. I have a change management certificate from Cornell University. And I also have a certificate of healthcare leadership, because not only did I work in healthcare IT, not only did I work in health insurance, not only did I work in Medicaid and Medicare, not only did I work in government healthcare agents in a government healthcare agency, but I also worked in a hospital. I worked in the neonatal ICU unit. So I understood how the hospital worked, and I also got a chance to experience healthcare IT from a different perspective. And in between those times, I also served as a life coach, an executive coach, and a learning management specialist, to where I help to build, facilitate, improve, evaluate, and manage learning programs, and also provide consulting services for building learning programs within organizations. So those are all the things that I've done. And now I do consulting. And the consulting that I do encompasses everything that I named. I do consulting services for learning and development. I do consulting services for corporate strategic planning. I do consulting services for succession planning. I do consulting services for customer service and customer facing, customer relations management. I do consulting services for so many different areas. And you can see these areas on the screen. And those are the things that I do. But I also help people put strategy and structure to their lives. And so that does not make me a life coach. I'm a life strategist. Even though I did life coaching, had a successful life coaching program that started in 2008 and lasted all the way to 2023. It was very successful. And I was able to help people grow and develop, and those same individuals that I started with and those individuals that went through my program, every last one of them are in a leadership capacity in some way or another. There are some who work for government agencies. There are some who are judges. There are some who are lawyers. There are some who are managers and executives in different parts of corporate America. Because I understood what it meant to function in purpose and making sure that your work aligns with your purpose. Now, mind you, I did all of this without having a degree. Now, I believe in education. I push my children to get education. I push people that I coach and that I mentor to take advantage of education opportunities. It just wasn't in the cards for me because I was also a husband and a father shortly after leaving the military. And so I had to be there for my wife and my sons. And to this day, none of my sons have been in jail. None of my sons have had run-ins with the law. All of my sons are hard workers. And all of my sons, by the end of the spring of 2026, by the end of 2026, all of my sons will be college graduates. And so investing in them and investing in my relationship with my wife of 29 years was more valuable to me than getting a piece of paper that said that I knew what I was talking about. Because even though I value education, I don't need a certificate or anything to validate my value. The only thing you have to do is listen at my record. Listen to my record. Listen to my receipts. And you'll see that I have a skill set and skill sets, that I have skills, knowledge, ability, experience, and lived experiences that will be of value to you. So if you would like to do business with me, I am the founding partner of Only Be You Consulting Program. I'm also a ministry consultant, and that is worked through PKJ Ministries. I'm also a small business consultant to help you move from being stuck to being profitable and being purposeful. I have clients that I have coached that are seven-figure earners. And I know how to coach them and I know how to help them to align their values with their purpose and with their goals. So I have the wherewithal to be able to impact corporate clients, corporate organizations, government organizations, executives, managers, leaders. I have the capacity to support you in any way that is necessary to help you win, because my whole ideology in life is that if you let me help you, I will make you a winner. So if you'd like to work with me, just fill out the outreach card. If you'd like to work with me, I would challenge you to go to the link in my bio. Schedule some time with me to sit down and find out how I can support you in what you do. I'm not a monolith, but I am someone who can use some of my monolithic experiences to make you a magnificent organization, agency, or person. And my name is Kendrick Jones. That's who I am. And you've seen a lot of what I do.